Growing up, I was always told that anime's for children and that someday I'll realize this and grow out of it. I was told it was just some cartoon meant to keep kids entertained, and while I can see where this is coming from as a person who has watched what some may consider way too much anime, I have to disagree. Anime has taught me so many life lessons, from Vinland Saga teaching me that even if wrong is done to you, that doesn't give you the right to continue this cycle. Or Mob Psycho teaching me that being emotionally mature and having a genuine connection far outweighs any kind of power or status that I may have. Even One Piece, which you'll get many videos on in the future, taught me that I should pursue my dreams and ambitions regardless of trials and tribulations that may stand as obstacles in my way. However, like most anime I've seen, including the ones I just mentioned, the lessons are not always presented right in front of you. You see, sometimes you have to dive deep and use context clues to fully understand what it is that the author is trying to convey. Frieren is no different with its themes and messages. I've heard a lot of discussion online that Frieren's too slow, and that because of the time spent between fighting and interesting action moments, people get bored and lose interest. I even saw that one post went as far as to mention that scenes spent in taverns and sitting around talking make it so that even if the fight scenes are good, it just doesn't matter. So with that in mind, I decided to make a video from my perspective when it comes to Frieren and its pacing and how that affects the story being told. Obviously, spoilers ahead for the Frieren anime. I won't go as far as to talk about the manga, but up to season 2 will be discussed. Before we dive deep into what exactly the messaging behind Frieren is, we must first talk about what exactly Frieren Beyond Journeys End is on a more simple level. Frieren Beyond Journeys End is a Japanese manga written by Kanehito Yamada and is illustrated by Tsukasa Abe. Kanehito Yamada had just finished a manga called Robot Shoujo, which is what I'm calling it for short because the actual name is not only too long, but also way too difficult for me to pronounce. However, this manga was not received super well, but one man named Katsuma Ogura, who was an editor at the time, considered his writing to be a masterpiece and insisted that he work with an illustrator for his next manga. This illustrator ended up being none other than Tsukasa Abe, and together they would go on to create what is known as Frieren Beyond Journeys End. To really understand what makes Frieren's pacing quote-unquote slow, we must start from the beginning, or should I say the end. Frieren begins as one journey ends. In most fantasy stories, this seems like a foreign concept, with most stories starting off with a beginning of a journey to defeat some evil being terrorizing humanity and pushing it deeper into the brinks of collapse. However, with Frieren Beyond Journeys End, this is not the case. We first cut into a group of heroes coming home after a long journey where they stand triumphant after defeating the Demon King. The whole town is in celebration over this major victory, but for our heroes, it's a bittersweet feeling. They've accomplished their goals now, but they no longer have a journey or an adventure keeping them together and bringing them lifelong memories as it had for 10 years. But for one person in this band of heroes, 10 years doesn't feel like such a long time spent together. That's because for Frieren, 10 years is nothing compared to the thousands of years she's lived and will continue to live after. You see, Frieren is an elf, the only one in her party, with Haiter the priest and Himmel the hero being humans, and Eisen the warrior being a dwarf. For everyone else, it was a long time spent together. Time getting to know one another and forming bonds closer than even some families. But for Frieren, this journey compared to her life happens in but a blink of an eye. Frieren had not grown used to feeling any sort of emotion towards people. When you live as long as her, you're forced to watch those you care about pass on, and thus the conundrum of immortality and how living forever, or in Frieren's case, thousands of years, can actually have a negative impact. Because of this, she never really tried to understand anyone on a personal level. Even the hero of their story, Himmel, whose name will go down in the history books as the man who defeated the Demon King, couldn't get Frieren to open up to him, no matter how hard he tried. We'll look further into that relationship later on, but for now I'll move on. Let's cut back to our party of heroes who are now standing under the meteor shower, reminiscing over the memories they had made together throughout these 10 years. Now it's time for all of them to go their separate ways, but before that, they make a vow that in 50 years' time, they'll come back together one last time. After their departure, we get to be alone for the first time with Frieren. And it's during this time we get to see how Frieren lives her life, and we watch as days, months, even years pass by. Frieren tries to find things to fill the endless days of her life with something that gives her meaning. And while we, the viewer, understand that there's a passage of time, they still use this as an opportunity to show a subtle yet noticeable change in the shopkeeper that she visits over the years, with him being middle-aged during their first meeting, but now he's much older with gray hair and wrinkles. This is just one of the ways that Frieren uses characters within the world to make it feel like it is a world that is lived in. And I know, on a base level, that sounds like, well, duh, people live in this world. But what I mean by this is that it shows the passage of time and means that even if we don't see it, they're still there. This little montage scene we get with Frieren seems fast to us, but I believe it was on purpose. You see, we get to see the passage of 50 years through the perspective of Frieren. And I know that she may have lived those 50 years, but looking back on it, those 50 years to her would look the same to us as us watching this 15-second montage. We then cut back to Frieren returning to the old town and meeting with Himmel again for the first time in 50 years. However, things take a shocking turn when we see Himmel and seeing that he's grown so old in what feels like a short amount of time. We as viewers tend to forget these kinds of things when our main character doesn't seem like they've aged a single day. So seeing Himmel in such a way is jarring at first. With the party all back together, we get a scene of the party for one last time, watching as the meteor shower passes the village the same as it did 50 years ago. It's after this scene that we're met with Himmel the hero's passing. At first, Frieren's apathetic. She doesn't seem to be bothered much by this. However, upon seeing Himmel's body covered in soil, Frieren for the first time breaks down into tears. These tears come from a realization that she never truly knew anything beyond surface level of Himmel the hero. The man who saved so many lives and yet could never succeed in getting a simple elf to open up about her feelings. She realized that human lives are much shorter than she had realized, and in doing so decided that she would go on her own journey to learn all there is to know about humans, and discover a piece of humanity within herself that she didn't even know she had. This is where the story of Frieren Beyond Journeys End truly begins. With Frieren's journey beginning, we start to finally get a look at this fantasy world and everything it has to offer. The first and most noticeable piece is the musical direction and the background art that's used in Frieren. Throughout the journey that Frieren and her apprentice Fern, who's the adoptive daughter of Haita the priest, and Stark, the disciple of Eisen the warrior, go through, we get many scenes where dialogue is not the only instrument carrying the story and our perception of it. You see, Frieren uses music as a piece of storytelling that is almost, if not more, emotionally stirring than any words could ever be. Music is one of those beautiful pieces that you can feel in your soul, and no amount of world building or storytelling can fully be complete without some sort of musical expertise. Music is something that Frieren does exceptionally well. The producers for Frieren already knew exactly who they wanted when they were deciding on who will make the music for Beyond Journeys End. It's a man named Evan Call. He's known for his previous work in Violet Evergarden, which if you haven't seen, I highly recommend. Evan Call had read the manga for Frieren long before composing the music for it, and because of this, he did something unusual. He composed a demo before the client had even set out a request for what they really wanted. This meant that Evan was so confident in his ability to make music for Frieren, he jumped on the opportunity immediately. So for the first 4 episodes, the fight in episode 8, and the ring scene in episode 14, which we'll talk about later on, they were made using this thing called a film scoring method. See, the film scoring method is when you compose music to match the scene. This means that Evan Call would be watching the exact scenes while making music for them. This method typically produces a more cinematic result. Most of your typical anime are composed using the menu-based scoring method, which is where the director and the sound director will pick through the songs and choose which best suits a scene. Frieren, however, was an outlier, with most anime using the menu-based scoring method, and don't get me wrong, Frieren used it all the time as well. However, over 30 of the songs in Frieren Beyond Journeys End use this film scoring method, which is unheard of and rare for most anime. But what I believe to be the most beautiful thing about Frieren's music choices is that Evan Call decided to use period and ethnic instruments to create a unique sound within the orchestra. He would use a variety of European instruments and some even older than that. With how much time and effort is put into Frieren's musical composition, it's hard to deny that Evan Call truly put love and passion into Beyond Journeys End. The way in which the music really pushes the story along and helps you feel an emotional connection to the scene is what makes the journey feel like one you're living through with the characters. However, music isn't the only thing that a lot of people often overlook when it comes to Frieren Beyond Journeys End. Background art is a major piece in Frieren's storytelling. The art was done by Studio Wenth under the director Sawako Takagi. The aesthetic of Frieren's background art is heavily influenced by the concept art from Seikyo Yoshioka. Takagi uses a visual blend of fantasy elements and detailed natural landscapes, making it take on a look that almost looks like watercolor painting. The background art focuses a lot on lighting and atmosphere and adds that slice of life feeling that you get from other animes in that genre. Frieren uses expansive fields, forests, and rural areas to help emphasize the quiet and slow-paced journey we're taking. It makes the interior of taverns and homes have a cozy and almost familiar feeling to them. The reason these almost watercolor looks are used is to make the background take on a sort of natural look to them that helps emphasize the passage of time and the beauty in mundane moments. One of the most beautiful parts about Frieren's artistic choices is the ending of season 2, where unique hand-drawn art is done meticulously, where they used pencils to create an almost warm, textured look. The use of background art really helps truly flesh out the world that is Frieren Beyond Journeys End, to a point of almost making it feel familiar to you at moments, as if you've seen this place before, but then the complete mystery and other aspects leaving you wanting to learn more. In Frieren Beyond Journeys End, we get to see many different characters interact with one another, and we get to see their difference in relationship and how they talk to one another. One of the first ones we get, other than Frieren's initial party of Himmel, Eisen, and Heiter, is the connection between Frieren and her apprentice Fern. Fern is given to Frieren by Heiter the priest, who is watching over her before he eventually passes on, leaving Fern under the care of Frieren. Fern is a prodigy when it comes to magic, making her and Frieren's connection almost instant. However, when it comes to Beyond Journey's End, the connection between characters is so much more than that. Fern and Frieren's dynamic is sort of complex at the beginning, with Frieren wanting to show Fern everything she knows when it comes to magic. But with her being a young girl who is growing up, she'll still need more than just a few magic spells to help get her through life. This is where we see the real connection grow, and we see Frieren and Fern's connection go from being a mentor, just showing her spells, to a child-parent dynamic, with Frieren helping her through her daily life and figuring herself out. Frieren's connection with Stark, however, is a bit different. See, Stark joined the party through a recommendation from Eisen, the original warrior of the hero party. Stark was impressively strong, and being able to even scare Eisen at some point with how much raw power he had when they would spar. But Stark could only believe himself to be a coward. He thought of himself as the one who ran away, deserted his home village when they truly needed him. And so he carried that guilt with him wherever he went. This shapes the bond between Frieren and Stark when the two first start their journey together. Frieren treats Stark with almost a calm approach, never pushing him to the point of breaking him internally, but enough to make him truly understand just what his potential is. Frieren shows Stark many times that even though he thinks of himself as a coward and believes that his strength should not be trusted, she still continues to put full faith in him, even going as far as putting her own life in his hands, because she truly believes in him and his ability to overcome any obstacle. Stark returns this by always being sure to stand tall, even when all he wants to do is run away. He learns that Frieren having trusting in him means that he should have the same trust within himself. But one of my favorite dynamics in Beyond Journeys End is the one between two whose paths cross by nothing more than fate. Fern and Stark are two of the most interesting characters in Frieren Beyond Journeys End when it comes to their relationship with one another. Fern initially viewed Stark as a hopeless coward. She would act cold towards him and not always feel comfortable relying on his strength. However, throughout their journey together, their dynamic would change many different times. The two begin to form a close bond with one another. They start to show signs of a slow burn, realistic romance. In the real world, romance isn't always easy. Sometimes it's awkward and sometimes it goes through rough patches. Well, the same goes between the relationship between Fern and Stark. This is what makes their situation feel so real to the viewer. It makes it relatable. The two often fight, with Fern being very blunt and outspoken, and Stark not only being shy, but super oblivious. This back and forth bickering is what makes this relationship between the two feel so real. They aren't like your typical shonen, with the couple being so straightforward and then they end up together. You get to see the real moments, the awkward and rough moments that every real life relationship must go through. You get to see the moments that they're both most vulnerable with each other, with Stark always trying to do his best to impress Fern and make her happy, and Fern always wanting what's best for Stark even if she doesn't show it in the best way. The relationship really shines during a scene where the two go on their first date together. To make a long story short, it doesn't all go as Stark had planned, with Fern seemingly not even having fun. However, the moment takes a turn when the two are finishing their date and they begin to talk through where things went wrong. This moment right here shows that this isn't your typical anime, with everything lining up and going right for the main characters romantically. It shows that this relationship will take time, and so they finish it by talking through. And at the end, Fern seems to truly appreciate the effort that Stark went through to make her happy. And all signs point towards a blooming romance. There are so many character dynamics that I did not even touch on, with this only being a small handful that you see in the show. However, these relationships truly show how much time and attention to detail the author of Frieren puts into these characters, and how he truly makes you feel as if you're learning to grow alongside them on their journey. The most important part of Frieren Beyond Journeys End is the juxtaposition between the adventure we're on right now and the one of the hero party in the past. As I had mentioned in the beginning of this video, the story begins where another ends. The reason for this becomes much more clear as our journey progresses. We don't get much about the hero party or the path they took throughout their adventure right away. Instead, Beyond Journeys End uses this adventure as a flashback during the moments of our current journey. We get to see the relationship between Frieren and Himmel throughout these flashbacks that add a length of depth to the character and the decisions that she makes. These flashbacks help to show how Frieren uses her past actions and relationships with others to help shape her current emotions as well. One scene in particular is between Himmel the hero and Frieren the mage. In episode 14 of the anime, the two set out together in a town in search of jewelry that Himmel promised to buy Frieren for her help on a quest. At first, it seems as if Frieren picks the first ring she sees. But whether or not on purpose or accident, she picked a ring with a mirror lotus on it. The mirror lotus is deeply associated with eternal love. With this ring, Himmel gets down on one knee and puts it on her finger, and even though Frieren doesn't comprehend it at the time, this is Himmel confessing his unspoken love to Frieren. Throughout the show, we get a closer look at this specific ring, and we see that the bud of the flower is unopened. This symbolizes love that was never fully expressed or realized, but it still remains as Frieren's most prized possession. This is one of many different flashbacks used in Beyond Journeys End to show the emotional growth that Frieren goes through throughout the story. We get to see many other flashbacks during our journey, such as Himmel being the main hero but never pulling out a special sword out of the stone. Or a flashback showing exactly why Frieren collects these useless spells. We even get a flashback showing just exactly how Frieren met Himmel, and that them coming together and becoming the hero party wasn't just some mistake. This shows just how captivating the story of Frieren is, with its use of flashbacks and diving deeper into our understanding of characters and events of the past, and how they can have a lasting effects on these characters. It shows how they react to different situations based on these flashbacks. They add a certain amount of emotional depth to the story and further foster your admiration and emotional connection to different characters. One of the things that Frieren does best when it comes to flashbacks is they're different from your typical anime flashback. They aren't long, drawn out, and disruptive to the story, but are shown in a more short form and impactful snippet that relates directly to the current experience or lesson being shown. With Frieren Beyond Journeys End, we get a long story that takes us into multiple shops, towns, taverns, and many other places along our adventure. With the use of musical composition, background art, the main characters' relationship dynamics, and even flashbacks that further progress the story, we're given a beautiful piece that continues to deliver in all the right moments. So in short, yes, I do believe that Frieren is slow. However, I believe that is what makes this story so beautiful. The ability to make a world that feels so full and lived in, and keeps me coming back every single time for more and more, no matter how slow it may be. The world of Frieren is truly a masterpiece that is able to make me contemplate things such as character growth, grief, and the passage of time. Rather than forcing constant action for the sake of keeping things entertaining, this slow burn pace is what makes Frieren Beyond Journeys End stand out among many fast-paced, action-packed anime that I'm personally used to. And this is what makes Frieren one of those anime that you'll think about long after the end credits roll. So with that, those are my thoughts on Frieren as an anime. I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. I want to put out more anime content like this and talk about more anime. Obviously One Piece, obviously Vinland Saga, Mob Psycho. If there's anything else you guys recommend in the comments, I'm always down to watch something new or to talk about anime in any sort of way, really. So make sure that you hit that like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you guys think. And I appreciate you guys so much for watching. I will be making this and gaming content kind of back to back as much as possible. So stick along for the ride. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.